therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic. Pandemic is not a word to use lightly or carelessly. It's a word that, if misused, can cause unreasonable fear.
COVID-19 pandemic gave devastating impacts on Malaysia economy from both external factors and internal factors. Critically, this pandemic disproportionately impacts smaller businesses and vulnerable groups such as lower-income individuals and workers. Unlike the global financial crisis in 2008 and the Asian financial crisis in 1997, Malaysia COVID-19 crisis is a public health crisis first and economic crisis second. Following this, economists generally agree that economic policy should focus mainly on bolstering public health effort in handling the pandemic while ensuring the people welfare and businesses. This pandemic was the greatest challenge Malaysia has faced. Unemployment rate in Malaysia jumped to 3.9% in March and will rise to 5.5% overall 2020. To overcome this situation, Malaysia's government has implemented Prihatin Economic Stimulus Package (ESP) that include National Care Assistance for the B40 and M40 group, Wage Subsidy Program, the People's Council Economic Stimulus Package and others. It was unveiled by the Prime Minister on 27 March 2020 with three goals that was to protect the people, business support and strengthen the economy in response to threat of COVID-19. Through the Prihatin program, it can help alleviate the cost of expenses incurred to continue its business. The economic stimulus package Prihatin announced by Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin is also good news for SME entrepreneurs for providing easy interest-free loan scheme. National Council Assistance (BPN), Wage Subsidy Program (PSU) and Special Council Grant Reopening are among the initiatives that benefit various sections of society, workers and the business community. National Concern Assistance (BPN). It is one of the additional assistance provided by the government to the B40 and M40 group to ease the burden of the people due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. With the presence of BPN, it can to some extent help the affected group, especially the B40 group for survival. Following the implement of the Conditional Movement Control or the PKPB in the state, the family income is quite uncertain. The government's move to provide BPN 2.0 is very timely because there are still many people in need of such assistance. Wage Subsidy Program (PSU). The SOCSO Wage Subsidy Program (PSU) are financial assistance programs paid to the employers to retain all local employees earning RM4,000 or less. Many employers and employees of the private education sector affected by the implementation of the Movement Control Order (PKP) receive benefits. PSU, for example, is a savior to the workers and employers affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Following the implementation of the Motion Control Order (PKP), many employers face constraint in the company's operation so that some have to cut salaries and even lay off employees. Thus, PSU managed to ease the burden of employers, especially in the bearing the payment of employee salaries. Once the PSU is received, it helps ease the burden of the company to pay salaries as the company's operations are severely affected. Additional help special SME facilities and micro entrepreneur. The first initiative involved the addition of funds in the Special Facility Assistance Fund for Small and Medium Enterprises (SME) of RM3 billion, bringing the total to RM5 billion. Apart from that, The interest rate for the entire fund will be reduced from 3.75% to 3.5%. The motive is to increase the size of the fund under the All Economic Sector Facility to further increase financing access to SMEs. This scheme will be operated by Bank Simpanan Nasional (BSN) by offering an interest rate of only 2% without collateral. Loan eligibility requirements are also relaxed with a minimum of 6 months of operation compared to 1 year of operation. The amount of financing is also increased per entrepreneur. This initiative is open to all micro entrepreneurs in all business sectors including nursery operators, bus and taxi operators, creative industry and online merchant. In addition, Prime Minister has announced the following measures of the taxes in Malaysia. First, a tax deduction or capital allowance will be given for expenses incurred on disposable or non-disposable personal protective equipment or other relevant equipment. Second, special tax relief up to RM1,000 will be given to individuals on domestic travel expenses incurred from 1 March 2020 to 31st December 2021. Third, sales tax exception of 100% and 50% are given for the purchase of locally assembled cars and imported passenger cars, respectively from 50 June 2020 to 31st December 2020. As we see, the current policy practiced in Malaysia is as above. The current policy that practiced in Malaysia during COVID-19 pandemic was supported by Keynesian theory. Keynes' ideas were given added importance by the Great Depression of 1930s, the worst the Western world had ever known. John Maynard Keynes, an English economist, published his General Theory of Employment Interest and Money 1936 during the Depression. Keynesian model makes a case for a greater levels of government intervention, especially during economic depression where there is a need for government spending to offset the fall in private sector investment. Keynes argued that during economic depression, government intervention actively through appropriate fiscal policy is important due to government can stabilize the economic cycle by controlling government spending and tax policies. Expansionary fiscal policy can stimulate economic activity where government increase their spending and reducing taxes to encourage Malaysian economic growth. Logically, if Malaysia government increases their spending by providing assistance to the people such as Prihatin Economic Stimulus Package (ESP) and also reducing the taxes, consumer will have monies to spend. This situation will stimulate the demand so that companies need more workers to meet the demand for consumer. It will increase employment opportunities and reduce unemployment rate in Malaysia. For instance, the US took a Keynesian ideas with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 (AARA), which combines reducing taxes and increasing government spending. As a result, the US economy recovered from the Great Recession more quickly. However, classical school did not agree with the Keynes' ideas that government intervention was important during the economic depression. This is because the principle of classical school was that the best government governed the least. According to Adam Smith, governments are wasteful, corrupt, inefficient and the guarantors of monopoly privileged to the detriment of society as a whole. The policy of laissez-faire received strong support in classical school because there is minimum governmental interference in the economic affairs of individual and society. Classical's ideas stress that the importance of government reducing borrowing and should balancing the budget due to there is no benefit from higher government spending. Classical economic places little emphasis the use of fiscal policy to manage aggregate demand. This is because, from the classical view, fiscal policy causes no long-term increase in real output. Classical economists believe that the economy was held to be self-adjusting and trending toward field employment without government intervention. There is an assumption that price of wages are flexible and in the long-term markets will be efficient and clear. For instance, suppose that there were a fall in aggregate demand. In the classical model, this fall in demand for labor caused a fall in wages. This decline in wages would ensure that full employment was maintained and market clear. While neoclassical believe in more passive fiscal policy approach designed to promote economic growth with stable prices. They believe in reduced tax rates and limited government spending. They believe will allow the private sector and thus the economy as a whole to flourish. One of the criticism of the Keynesian ideas is that the government to borrow money, which may lead to higher interest rate, making it harder to private businesses to borrow money. Neoclassical avoid budget deficit and government borrowing as they believe it causes interest rate to rise and reduce private investment. This is known as crowding out and weaken the effects of fiscal policy. Many neoclassical, including Alan Greenspan, one of the neoclassical economists, are worried of budget deficits, arguing that they provide a drag on economic growth because of crowding out. In neoclassical, they believe that reducing taxes will stimulate the economy and bring in additional tax revenues so that reduced taxes lead to more revenues and thus lower budget deficit. The implication of reduced taxes on personal income cause an increase in the supply of labor as individuals increase their work effort and work hours, and reduce taxes on corporate profit cause an increased business investment. Increased labor supply and investment lead to more aggregate supply and enhance economic growth. In conclusion, the Malaysian government's decision during the COVID-19 pandemic to introduce Consent Economic Stimulus Package (ESP) is in line with Keynesian theory. According to the theory of Keynes, government is one of the variables that can regulate government expenditure and tax policy to sustain the economic cycle. The conduct of the government, however, is not in line with classical school, since the principle of classical school was that the strongest government rules the least. The Keynesian model advocates higher level of government involvement, particularly during the economic crisis when government expenditure is required to counter the decline in private sector investment. While the idea of classical emphasized the value of government, minimizing borrowing and balancing the budget because higher government expenditure does not benefit. Classical economists assume that without government interference, the economy is held to be self-adjusting. There is an expectation that wage rates are flexible and productive and transparent in long-term markets. But as we can see, the government decision that introduced the ESP was speed the recovery of economic cycle. It makes a lot of benefit for the various sections of society, workers and the business community. Neoclassical belief in reduced tax rates and limited government spending will stimulate the economy and bring in additional tax revenues so that reduced taxes lead to more revenues and thus lower budget deficit. However, neoclassical do not believe the increase of government spending because it causes interest rates to rise and reduce private investment.